Welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cohn, and it is my honor to serve as the host for this podcast series. Today, we are so fortunate to have with us Chris Cayley of Cyan Partners, where he serves as a managing director. Welcome, Chris.
Great to be here. Great to be here, Pam.
I was going to first describe Cyan Partners, but I think I'm going to leave that to you. So let's start with tell me about your background and how you got to Cyan Partners, and then we'll talk about what Cyan Partners does.
Well, sounds good. Well, a long time ago, I used to be a lawyer, Pam. I practiced with what was Cameron Markby Hewitt and is now CMS Cameron McKenna Nabarro Olswang. I practiced for about 3 years as a litigator. I could do it, but I didn't really enjoy it, so I knew that long term being in the law wasn't going to be for me. And funny enough, I started my career at Cameron's thinking that I was going to be hoping I would be an environmental lawyer. But back in the 80s, being an environmental lawyer in a big city firm probably wasn't quite what it is now in the new context. So there's some ways in which I was starting my career all over again as a young lawyer, going into all of these issues that we're going to be talking about today. But that's not how it worked out. And I decided, because I've always enjoyed the client side and always enjoyed working with people, that moving into legal recruitment was a good, logical career move for me. So I am a legal recruiter, and I'll talk more about what Cyan does in a minute. But I went into legal recruitment, and I've been working in legal recruitment for nearly 30 years now, and have been with various legal recruitment businesses of different sizes, including starting a firm with 2 other people back in the noughties, a business called First Counsel, which we ran very successfully for about 10 years. That was an international legal recruitment business, and even back then, as part of that business, we were doing things that were climate related. And for example, this is going back 10, 11 years. We were planting trees on behalf of candidates that we placed. The 3 of us who set it up kind of grew apart post credit crunch, and so it's more like 15, 16 years ago, Pam.
Time flies.
Yeah, it really does. So I had a short spell back in the world of corporate recruitment, with a big recruitment group for a couple of years, but then set up the company that we're running now just over 8 years ago. And we 2 of us set the company up. My colleague Sarah Coftree and I set it up in 2016. It was called Cayley Coftree for a bit, but more recently, about 3 years ago, we decided that as we wanted to grow, that we didn't want founders' names out there anymore, that we wanted to develop a brand. So we became Cyan Partners just over 2 years ago. And we're a small legal recruitment business, but we're 5 partners now. We are we're all pretty experienced legal recruiters, and our specialism is in partner recruitment for law firms, partner and team recruitment. We also do a lot of law firm risk and compliance recruitment. So that includes recruiting general counsel for law firms, and people within their teams. So we do director, head of level. We get into subject matter experts, like people who are specializing in financial crime, AML, conflicts, all those areas. And we also do in-house recruitment. And what's been quite exciting for me over the last few years, as someone who's always been interested in the issue of climate change and how we tackle it, is that now it's starting to, these issues with the rise of ESG are starting to permeate every area of legal practice. So we're seeing the issue come to the fore in almost every area.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that eventually ESG will just be the way we do business, not just practice law, but the way we do business, and it's no longer going to be a separate thing. But right now it's kind of a separate thing. So for the benefit of our audience, but perhaps more so for the benefit of me, you mentioned corporate recruiting, which you've done for a while, and then legal recruiting. And I'm assuming that the difference is legal recruiting focuses on lawyers in and outside of the legal profession, right? Because you're doing some in-house recruiting and some recruiting for law firms themselves.
That was me slipping into jargon, Pam. All I meant by that was that I got tempted back into a job still working in legal recruitment, but with a big multidisciplinary recruitment group.
Yep.
So I had a spell back in that world in a pure management role. And as it happened, I that wasn't really for me. I missed being in the front line. I missed talking to clients. I missed talking to people who are looking to advance their careers or develop their careers. Didn't so much enjoy spending lots of time looking at spreadsheets and what was going on within the business. So that's all I meant by the world of corporate recruitment. Okay. And that's part of the reason that we set up Cyan, is that we wanted kind of to get back to basics and kind of get into, I like business building, Pam.
Yep. That's quite obvious. You've done it a few times. So you were just touching on how you're starting to see ESG permeate all different areas of law, all different types of skill sets that you might be looking for. Tell me more about that. And is it as prevalent within companies as it is in law firms, or are companies leading? Are law firms leading?
I think it's most of our practice is the core of our practice is based on law firms, Pam. So most of what I'm seeing is from that perspective. And what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years are more and more partners and other fee earners holding out and advertising ESG capability or developing it. But also that has led to law firms seeking that expertise or seeking those people. So, over the last 2 or 3 years, there have been some quite significant partner moves within the UK private practice world of people who are out and holding themselves out or are ESG specialists. I mean, it's a developing area. So you often hear people saying, are there any real genuine ESG experts? And of course there are, because there are people who are getting all over the regulations that we have in place, or are coming down the track, et cetera, or are focusing on ESG finance or sustainable finance. But it's also still an area that has a long way to develop, I think, within law firms. So of course, as it develops, and it's a bit like any new practice area or trend, there are people who are at different stages of development of their practice.
Yes.
So we, I think we are seeing law firms build ESG facing practices that to some extent are both looking inwards into the firm and outwards to their clients. And then everyone along the spectrum, shall we do this? Shall we start it? We've got this huge ESG practice that's doing X, Y, and Z. So it's happening at fee earner level, but also we are seeing within the private practice world the start of the sorts of roles that are leading on ESG and sustainability. For example, firms recruiting heads of responsible business, or even heads of environmental and sustainability matters, or or some firms now appointing chief sustainability officers.
Right. For the firm itself.
For the firm. For the
client-facing team of lawyers that are serving clients in ESG, these roles that you're talking about are actually operational for the firm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Strategic and operational, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so on the in the corporate side of the market, the in-house counsel market, I think a lot of companies are way ahead of law firms, in the sense that most, a lot of corporates now will have a head of sustainability or a CSO. And the in-house team is over the last few years is starting to engage with that person or support the sustainability function because of the regulation, because of the risk factors, all the governance factors that obviously feed into the issue. And again, I'm leaping about a bit here, but the same applies for the in-house function of law firms, and that's what we are also starting to see, which is GCs that I'm talking to within law firms. They're on the sustainability committee,
yes,
or they're taking a lead on sustainability and ESG because they have to, because it's an opportunity and a risk to the firm. And there's the governance side. It all feeds into each other.
Yes, it does. And I think and you and I have had this conversation before. I think it's so important that the concept of sustainability or responsible business cannot be housed in just one person.
No.
Because even if a firm has a CSO, that CSO has to work with legal for the compliance portion. They have to work with marketing communications for the reporting. They have to work with finance. They have to work with operations. So it really does permeate the entirety of an organization, and that includes law firms who are embarking on this journey.
Yeah, and the thing that really struck me a few years ago was that suddenly seeing that the role that the general counsel of a company will play, because they are in that kind of fulcrum position.
Yep.
They're such a pivotal person to the senior leadership team, and they do engage with lots of different functions, and they're looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at risk factors for the company, reputational risk, governance issues. So, there's from your involvement with them, but the General Counsel's Sustainability Forum is a Adam Woodall's venture, is a really good example of the role that GCs are playing in ESG and will continue to play. And from our perspective, from a recruitment perspective, that does mean that we've seen not only the GC leading on this, but then actually companies are starting to bring people in as at team level.
Yes.
Just to focus on ESG.
Yep.
And ESG regulation and all those kind of business critical issues.
What are some of the things that your client companies that are looking for people, what are the key skill sets or experience sets they're looking for?
That's a really good question, because I think obviously it depends on the sector the company is operating, but clearly regulatory skills, regulatory knowledge, experience of regulation is very important. So that they'll be looking for people who have shown a passion for getting to know what's going on on the regulatory and governance side and what's coming down the track. But also, all good in-house lawyers need good commercial skills to kind of get what's going to, to understand what are going to be the important factors within commercial contracts in the new world, in the world we're moving into.
Yep.
And that, I think litigation skills are useful. But it's again, it's one of these things where it feels to me like an evolving area.
So in your earlier comments about there are some firms that are looking for people to be the responsible business person, the CSO, head of sustainability, head of ESG, whatever you call it. Are law firms looking for lawyers to fill those roles, or are they open to other experiences, areas of expertise, credentials, et cetera?
I think there's a couple of things, or a few things going on here, and again, it depends on the tone that's being set from the top of the firm, and it depends on firms are adopting different ways of going about it. So I think a good analogy is when in the UK the Legal Services Act came in, and every firm had to have a COLP, compliance officer for the legal practice, and some firms just immediately appointed a partner to do it because that was at that time that was one of the best ways of addressing the issue, and it was at a time when not every law firm had a general counsel. And often when they did have a general counsel, again, it would be a partner who wanted to take on the role. And you wind forward 10 years, and virtually every major firm has a general counsel and they have a big in-house team around them. And often they do bring someone in from outside the firm to take on that role because they want someone who brings fresh eyes to it, doesn't have any political baggage or history with the firm, and is going to stand in the role and tell it as it is. So in relation to the current trends with ESG and how firms are dealing with ESG internally and sustainability internally, often there is somebody within the firm who grabs it and says, I'll lead on this. So it'll be a partner who takes it on and develops it, or someone from the operational side who says, I'll take on that challenge for the firm. And that's great. I mean, it is good that that's happening. So there are, we know that there are chief sustainability officers out there within UK law firms who've been appointed into the role internally. Same with head of responsible business and other areas. But I think we're moving into a phase where more skills are going to be needed, more talent is going to be needed, because that, it's a big job.
It's a very big job.
It's a big job. You need you need to draw on lots of different people. So I'm a huge supporter of this idea that you can't just appoint a CSO or someone to lead the charge on it and just say, yep, that's done. They'll be able to sort it, because it's a massive job. There are so many different strands to it and so many different bits of experience needed.
And you and I have been in this profession long enough to remember when this same sort of introduction of a new role at a law firm came with officers of Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity, right?
Yep.
You can't just hire somebody and say, check the box, that's done. No, that person is hired to change the firm and to change.
Yeah.
And the same is true with, responsible business officers or CSOs. I mean, they're hired to help the company evolve. And it's not somebody who's going to sit in the basement and just check boxes on a reporting disclosure form, right? Those are two different roles.
Absolutely, and I think there's I do think there's still quite a long way to go, and I appreciate that that for as as a recruiter working in this, I am very conscious that there's kind of two sides to it. There's the inward looking, what's the firm doing side, but there's also the advisory, outward looking client side, and the two are not totally distinct. They do kind of feed into each other, but the roles can be quite different. So back to your question a minute ago, yes, there are firms who are hiring people from outside the firm to focus purely on the firm's carbon strategy, and environmental strategy. What's the firm doing itself? Get our house in order.
Yeah,
that is happening. They're not trying to do that themselves.
Right.
But the firms that are, I don't think there are that many firms who've really kind of made that kind of appointment.
Yeah.
And they may increasingly need to.
Yes.
Or want to.
Yep. And in large part, not so much that law firms will fall under the regulatory guidelines. Some will because of their size, their footprint, but most won't. But I would suspect, getting some of this pressure from their client organizations who do fall under the regulatory disclosure requirements and therefore have to know what their law firms are doing with respect to carbon reduction. So
definitely,
it no longer works for a law firm to just say, oh, we don't know what our carbon footprint is. We've never measured it. No, we don't have a carbon reduction plan. It's not going to work for very much longer.
No.
So I'm curious to hear from you. What's in store? I mean, we're recording this at the end of April, so we're already 4 months into the year. But what do you think is in store for ESG in the legal profession in 2024?
Wow. I mean, it's a challenging question, Pam. But in some of the discussions that I've been having over the last few months, it seems to me that we're now well into scope 3 being under the under scrutiny. That process is well and truly underway. And that's back to your point about law firms. They're part of the supply chain, so they're in the spotlight for that, as well as looking at their own supply chains. Scope 4, advised admissions. That's a we're moving into that phase now. I think. And I was talking to someone the other day about the possibility of going back into a law firm from a legal background, but having pivoted into getting involved in more ESG issues. And the individual concerned said, not really for me, because I don't really want to spend the next 10 years fighting with partners about scope 4 and advised admissions. And that is a huge challenge.
It is huge. And you're much further along that journey here in the UK than in the US. So I think advised emissions is part of the conversation in the UK. I don't see it so much in the US yet.
Yeah. That's really,
in the
that's
US,
interesting.
We're still fighting about, do I have to measure my carbon footprint? So there is definitely a global difference, but I agree with you. Advised emissions is going to be the next area of focus.
But the other things that I just come to mind are, we've got a kind of a growing generational issue. Young lawyers coming into the profession who are very passionate about the future and the need to address in particular climate change, but also very conscious of social issues and a just transition, but that it's a holistic thing. So I think that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how the legal profession deals with that, which is obviously very it's a sensitive issue, but it's also it's a business critical issue because it'll play to retention and talent retention. Also, a lot of need for developing new skills.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I know I would say this, but more people,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
more resources. I think that's going to, I think we probably will see people focusing in, teams focusing in this area growing.
I think so too, but I also believe that eventually ESG will just be the way business is done. It will just be the way law is practiced, every area of law.
Yeah.
It will just be the new standard expectation. And then it won't be a matter of, gosh, we don't have enough people focusing on ESG, because everybody will be doing it. Just like everybody now uses a computer, when it used to be just the technology practice at a law firm that got computer.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do remember when we, when email came in. That was great.
I do too. I do too. I remember the first fax machine, and the only person in the office qualified to use it and was trained on it was the receptionist. The rest of us couldn't touch it. So I think eventually this new way to think about doing business that encompasses ESG factors, it's not going to be a separate thing. And I might not live long enough to see it, but I think it's eventually just going to be the way business is done. Let's hope. Let's hope.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with you. I defining ESG. Sometimes my colleagues, we talk about ESG and what's going on within our sector, and actually, defining it is quite a difficult thing in terms of what clients want, because it shouldn't be a separate team.
Right.
And it's not a separate legal discipline.
Nope.
It feeds into everything, as you
I describe it as the framework in which business decisions, strategic business decisions are made. So that means it's a board issue, because when boards make decisions about their company, or leadership teams make decisions about the operations of their company, if you're doing it with an ESG mindset, that means you give consideration to the environmental impact, the social ramifications, and do we have proper governance in place for these decisions? So that's what I'm saying when I say eventually I think it's just going to permeate the way we run our businesses. So
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too.
I really hope so.
I hinted at this when I said, let's hope so. Tell me what gives you hope, because there certainly is enough in this space that those of us who are in it can get discouraged, can get frustrated, can throw up our hands in despair, but we all are still in it. So I'm curious about what gives you hope, what keeps you plugging away.
Well, I'm gonna share a few things on this, Pam.
Okay.
But I'll go back to a point I made at the beginning of our conversation, which was, to me, it gives me a lot of hope that, having been involved in the profession for over 30 years now, I find it really hopeful that we are having these conversations in relation to, the international legal sector. It is in the mainstream of the conversation in the profession, which is a really exciting development, and that's for lots of different reasons. There's obviously all the energy work that's being done, and the infrastructure work that's being done to facilitate energy transition and all that, but also the bigger issues are starting to permeate through the profession as well. The S of ESG, the need for change and all that. It's exciting that we're having the conversation.
Yes.
On a personal level, one of the things that gives me hope is a community that I'm involved with of crazy long distance cyclists who've been I've been taking part in an event called Ride the Change, which has happened 3 times now. The first one was before the UK COP, when about 100 of us cycled from London to Glasgow over the course of a week, all from all sorts of different backgrounds, but all connected with ESG and connected with sustainability in some way. And the conversations that we had on those trips and the community that came together gave me huge hope, because it just was a reminder of how much good stuff is going on out there. And I've just come back from one, actually. I got back about a week ago from the latest one, which was London to Brussels, and there was a panel at the end of it, hosted by AECOM, about the transition. And in the closing remarks, Andrew Griffiths from Planet Mars was asked about trends and what's going on, and he said something that really struck me, which is, the social tipping point is much closer than you think. And I think he's right. It gives me a lot of hope to think on that the whole climate conversation is now part of our everyday on a much more consistent basis than it was 30, 40 years ago. And I think we're very close to it becoming a kind of mainstream, mainstream thinking, that we need radical change, that we need significant change in the way we live, the way we do business, and that we can get there. The groundswell of support to do it is there. Well,
and the threat of not doing anything has also been felt by many people around the world, right? I mean, we've all had miserable hot summer days because we don't have air conditioning in our house. We've never needed it before, right? And we're all feeling the temperature rise in more ways than one, right?
Well, everyone's so much more conscious now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Chris. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm certain our audience did as well.
Pam, thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Take care.